Fewer than 20 new COVID infections recorded locally. Another ambush lockdown underway, this time in Taiwan and Tunmun. And Myanmar's de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi is formally charged following coup which overthrew her government.
Hello and a very good evening. We begin with some good news on the coronavirus front as the city recorded only 19 new COVID-19 infections with no imported cases. That's the lowest daily tally in more than 2 months.
There are also around 20 presumptive cases, in addition to one infection with uncertain test results, which came from last night's overnight lockdown operation. Jackie Lin tells us more.
Although the number of cases hit a 2.5-month low, authorities reminded the public to remain vigilant.
For every case, there might be a transmission chain, and it is possible that that one patient may infect many others. So we cannot say that the situation is completely under control.
Among the 7 cases with unknown origins is a clinic assistant who works at Virtus Medical Tower in Central. The entire 16th floor where she works will be closed for 14 days. The virus-tainted Uniqlo branch in Mongkok's Langham Place saw one more new infection. The store now has 5 COVID cases in total. An elderly care home in Tai Po saw one more worker and the resident infected. One more linked case at the construction site for the airport's 3rd runway. Pokai Hospital too saw one asymptomatic patient who tested preliminary positive. A 66-year-old Shangshui resident tested COVID positive after passing away. Having developed symptoms late last month, the man handed in his specimen to a clinic, but the sample bottle was not sealed properly and did not get screened. After his family failed to contact him, they called the police. When officers broke into his flat, the man was found dead inside. Meanwhile, the city's 5th lockdown blitz in Jordan, Tai Po and Tinshui saw around 2,100 residents tested. One uncertain COVID case was unearthed in Jordan.
Every now and then we receive lab results like this because maybe the CT value is very high, so the viral load is very low, or after repeated checking, some of them will become confirmed cases.
In the 3 districts, residents of more than 250 flats, that's 1/5 of the total, did not answer the door when authorities came knocking. Meanwhile, 7 more buildings have been slapped with test mandates. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
Meanwhile, authorities have again locked down areas around town for mandatory testing. Places under lockdown include Meiwa House of Hinghwa Estate in Taiwan, as well as Block 1 of Goodview Garden in Tunmun. The aim is to get all residents tested by 7 a.m. tomorrow. They must also stay in the premises until the operation is completed.
The government is reportedly going to require all civil servants to use its Leave Home Safe app when they return to the office tomorrow.
Meanwhile, there's word teachers will be tested regularly. The Education Bureau says schools can reopen after Lunar New Year earlier than planned if they ensure that teachers get tested.
2 months after the Leave Home Safe app was launched, not only do restaurants display its QR code for users to scan, but also government premises. But during lunch hour today, not everyone entering the government headquarters seemed to be using the app. Sources say the Civil Service Bureau issued an internal email today noting that the government strongly advised everyone entering the central government offices, including civil servants, scan the QR code using the tracing app and show proof to security officers. Those who do not follow the suggestion will have to jot down their personal details and the department they belong to. The trial scheme is expected to begin tomorrow. This woman said, "I actually don't mind doing it because we must pass through this route every day at work. It's just like what the government does with lockdowns now. I think it's okay as long as infections can be zeroed soon," she added. This civil servant says she's worried it's going to take time for security staff to check whether they have scanned the code, which makes it inconvenient to get to work. But she agrees that this would play a part in fighting against the virus. Meanwhile, sources say the Education Bureau is planning to test all teaching staff every 2 weeks. That's as on-campus teaching is set to fully resume in March, with only half-day classes allowed. The Hong Kong Federation of Education Workers hopes that government workers will assist with the testing, especially with using nasal swabs. It noted the other way is to let janitors collect and hand in specimen bottles, but that would be undesirable considering the risk of infection.
Pro-establishment legislator Alice Mak has suggested the government inoculate the city's cross-boundary truck drivers on the mainland to ensure that essential goods keep flowing.
A lot of cross-boundary truck drivers, they are subject to a lot of restrictions. They need to stay in designated hotels and in Shenzhen and so on. If we don't have these drivers, the production chain for necessary items will be broken. So can we give vaccinations for these drivers in Shenzhen?
The Hong Kong government has waived mandatory quarantine for cross-boundary drivers, but they face strict entry requirements when entering the mainland. Transport and Housing Chief Frank Chan said he's in talks with mainland authorities to get hold of vaccines. He said he would look at all possible options.
World Health Organization investigators visited a research center in Wuhan today that has been the subject of speculation about the origins of the coronavirus pandemic. The visit to the Wuhan Institute of Virology is a highlight of their mission to gather data and search for clues as to where the virus originated and how it spread. One of China's top virus research labs, the institute built an archive of genetic information about bat coronaviruses after the 2003 SARS outbreak. That has led to unproven allegations that it may be linked to the original outbreak of SARS-CoV-2 in the late 2019. China strongly denied that possibility. One of the team members said they will press key staff on critical issues.
The latest condemnation over this week's coup in Myanmar is coming from the G7. The bloc is calling upon the military to immediately end the state of emergency and restore power to the democratically elected government.
Now, this comes as the country's military junta filed charges against Myanmar's democracy icon and de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi. In Yangon, residents show their opposition to the military coup that occurred earlier this week in Myanmar. People banged pots and pans, while others drove through streets honking their horns. The newly formed Myanmar Civil Disobedience Movement said about 70 hospitals and medical departments stopped work to protest the coup. Their decision comes amid the COVID crisis. Some think the military action will now affect their livelihood. This vendor says people won't buy newspapers if military leaders appear on the covers. In the capital, people are worried for civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi. This person says they are praying for Mother Suu and hope she is released along with the other leaders so they can return their lives back to normal. Hundreds protested in Australia's largest city of Sydney calling for Suu Kyi's release. Washington has now labeled the events in Myanmar as a coup and will review its economic aid to the country. The UN envoy for Myanmar urged the UN Security Council to collectively send a clear signal in support of democracy in Myanmar. The group of 7 largest developed economies said it was deeply concerned about the fate of Myanmar's detained political leaders. Suu Kyi, the country's civilian leader, is right back where she was just over a decade ago, under house arrest. She had been a fierce critic of the army during her years in detention. But after her shift from democracy icon to politician, she worked with the generals. U.S. President Joe Biden signed 3 executive orders dealing with asylum at the U.S.-Mexico border, legal immigration, and reunifying families.
I'm not making new law. I'm eliminating bad policy. What I'm doing is taking on the issues that 99% of them, that the last president of the United States, issued executive orders I thought were very counterproductive to our security, counterproductive to who we are as a country, particularly in the area of immigration.
The orders undo many of his predecessors' immigration policies, including a review of a Trump-era rule that made it harder for poor immigrants to obtain permanent residency in the United States. This new proposed legislation could offer a path to citizenship to approximately 11 million people. Biden also created a task force to reunite migrant families who were separated at the U.S.-Mexico border by Trump's 2018 zero-tolerance border strategy. This is the 9th executive action he has taken dealing with immigration during his 2 weeks in office.
U.S. lawmakers and police officers have been paying their last respects to police officer Brian Sicknick, who is laying in honor at the U.S. Capitol. Sicknick was killed as he tried to protect the Capitol when a mob of Trump supporters stormed the building last month. U.S. President Joe Biden and his wife Jill traveled to the Capitol to pay tribute to the officer. After placing his hand on the urn in the building's rotunda, he said a prayer and sadly shook his head. A handful of congressional leaders also took part. Sicknick died after defending the Capitol on January 6th against a violent mob that took the building by siege. The mob wanted to interrupt the electoral count after then-President Donald Trump riled up the crowds to overturn his defeat. Sicknick's final cause of death has yet to be determined. And still ahead on tonight's news. Police opened fire on car during drugs bust. Hundreds detained as Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny is jailed. And tech tycoon Jeff Bezos stepped down as head of Amazon.
Hello again. Police opened fire to stop a car in Tai Po, which they say was being used to carry illegal drugs last night.
3 people have been arrested on suspicion of drug offences, with the driver also accused of dangerous driving. Haley Joe has more.
At around midnight last night in Tai Po, a black Lexus flipped over on the road. According to police, it all started when officers spotted a car parked outside a public housing block on Wuhan Estate and a man standing close to the driver's door. Police say he looked suspicious, making them believe a drug deal was underway. Seeing the officers approaching him, the man who was standing next to the car ran off, but was subdued and arrested. The police say they found a packet of suspected cocaine near the 31-year-old during the arrest. Meanwhile, the driver tried to flee the scene in the car with a woman on board. But police say when the car hit a dead end, it U-turned and accelerated towards the officers. As the driver continued to ignore warnings to stop, one of the officers fired a shot at the car. The bullet hit the windshield, but no one was hit. But the driver lost control of the car and crashed into railings and then overturned. The 20-year-old woman was trapped and injured. The police say she suffered a minor shoulder injury and she was conscious when she was sent to hospital. Chief Inspector Kwon Chun-hin of the New Territories North Regional Crime Unit says the lives of his colleagues were under threat when the officer pulled the trigger. The police arrested the 3 on suspicion of drug trafficking after they found around 7 grams of suspected cocaine packed in 12 bags from the car. The 23-year-old driver is also accused of dangerous driving. The police are investigating the incident and are appealing for witnesses to come forward. Haley Joe, TVB News.
Chief Executive Carrie Lam is accusing Britain of using political maneuvers for economic gain by granting pathways to residency and citizenship for Hong Kongers holding British national overseas passports. In her blog, Lam criticized not just the British government of breaking its promises, but also property developers there for seeing Hong Kongers as their prime sales targets. Noting President Xi Jinping's previous visit to Britain, which was hailed as the start of a golden era between the two countries, Lam believes the right path is for the UK to seize on financial opportunities with Hong Kong or China through official avenues.
HK01 has laid off more than 40 staff, citing restructuring reasons. The layoff, which mainly targets its logistics and operations branches, accounts for 5% of the online news platform's manpower. HK01 noted it will offer reasonable and suitable layoff proposals for affected employees. Following the company's shakeup, the news portal says it will focus more on topics related to finance, health, and education.
Kwok Hui-ting, the daughter of the Kaisa Group founder, has bought control of Singtao News Corporation. The acquisition pushed Singtao's shares up by 54% on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. The mainland real estate developer bought a 28% stake of Singtao from the company's chairman, Charles Ho, at 369.8 million Hong Kong dollars. Singtao was founded by businessman Ah Boon Ha back in 1938 and was sold to Ho in 2001 due to financial difficulties. During Ho's tenure of 20 years, Singtao bought East Week magazine and started a new free publication, Headline Daily. The English-language newspaper The Standard is also owned by Singtao.
Overseas again, Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny has been jailed for more than 2.5 years.
A court ruled he violated the terms of his probation while recuperating Germany from being poisoned by a nerve agent. The ruling outraged his supporters and sparked more protests across the country. Leslie Tang has more.
Appearing calm, fierce Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny entered the courtroom, where he stood in a glass cage to hear the ruling. The court ruled he should be jailed for more than 2.5 years for violating the terms of his probation from a 2014 embezzlement conviction. Navalny has rejected it as trumped-up charges. During the proceedings, he made the shape of a heart on the glass to his wife Yulia, who was listening in court. Navalny was arrested on January the 17th upon his return to Russia after being treated in Germany for 5 months for nerve agent poisoning. He mocked President Vladimir Putin in court over speculation the leader had Navalny's underwear laced with poison, saying, "We have Vladimir the underwear poisoner. This is how he will go down in history." Navalny and his lawyers argued that while he was recovering in Germany, he could not register with Russian authorities as required by his probation orders. Russia's penitentiary service had asked the court to turn his 3.5-year suspended sentence into real jail time. About a year he spent under house arrest will be counted as time served. He described his jailing as a travesty of justice. His lawyers said they plan to appeal and will inform the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe, which monitors the implementation of European court decisions.
Jeff Bezos, who founded Amazon as an online bookstore in 1995, is stepping down as chief executive officer. The 57-year-old said he will stay on as executive chairman. In a note to employees, he said, "This isn't about retiring. I've never had more energy." Bezos said he'll have more time for side projects, including his space exploration company, Blue Origin, and overseeing the Washington Post, which he owns. By some measures, he remains the world's richest man, but he is being challenged by Tesla chief Elon Musk. Bezos will be replaced in the summer by Andy Jassy, who runs Amazon's cloud computing business. That's the news. Thanks for watching.
Bye for now.